The small hatchback segment is still one of the most important parts of the Australian new car landscape. These sorts of cars do so much for so many people, and we've got three of the big name players at the budget end of the market. Each of these models represents the entry-level grade to the range, except one of them has an important option box ticked in order to bring it in line with the other cars here. We've brought back the Toyota Corolla Ascent Sport because it won our previous hatchback comparison at the budget end of the segment. So, can it retain its crown against two upstart newcomers? Last time around, we put the Toyota Corolla up against the Hyundai i30 and previous gen Mazda 3, and we're keen to see if this thoroughly impressive hatch can win again against two all-new models. There's no doubt it'll be a tough ask for the Corolla up against the all-new Mazda 3 G20 Pure, which hardly looks like a base model, but just like its rivals here, this version is the range opener. Wonder if there's more to it than just sleek styling. Our other contender is the Kia Cerato S, which, with those poverty pack plastic wheel covers, looks considerably more like a base model than its competitors. If you can overcome some of the challenging aspects of its styling, you'll find a very practical and value-packed model. Now, before you go smashing us in the comments with Hyundai i30, where's the Honda Civic? No Volkswagen Golf. Just remember, these are the cars that you've asked us to review, so that's why they're here. If you want to know more about each of these cars, you can read the full review at the CarsGuide site. And if you're watching on YouTube, don't forget to hit subscribe and also hit that bell notification icon so you can keep up to date with all our latest content. You might think three base model hatchbacks should mean bargain basement pricing, but there's a good chance you'll be shocked at just how expensive things can get at this end of the market. Here are the list prices for the automatic versions of these base model vehicles. And note that Kia doesn't do list pricing, it only has drive-away pricing. But now, here's the drive-away prices for these particular models as tested. Note that the Kia has the optional safety pack fitted, and we think you should fit it. And the Toyota has a pack with rear-tinted windows, sat-nav and digital radio. Read the full written review at CarsGuide for a comprehensive breakdown on equipment levels across all three models. It's a tried and tested formula, a 2-litre petrol engine, an automatic transmission and front-wheel drive. There really isn't much separating these three in terms of power and torque, but the Toyota bucks the trend with a continuously variable transmission that has an innovative launch gear for smoother takeoffs. We'll get to that in a sec. For this test, we took all three of these models out for an urban driving loop, including roundabouts and speed humps, before hitting the highway and heading onto some winding roads to see how they stacked up. I didn't just drive these cars and test them on my own though. We had a bit of a weird CarsGuide family gathering in each of these models over the same roads. And let me tell you, it was really insightful. The new generation Mazda 3 doesn't quite have the same fun factor as the old one did. It's still good to drive with sweet steering and a good ride at higher speeds, making for plenty of open road enjoyment, and it's more refined and quieter than ever too. But the downside is that the suspension can be unpleasant around town, particularly if you encounter a lot of speed humps and potholes. For our 3-up testing, the Mazda was the worst experience for everyone inside, and for the driver, the steering can be inconsistent in its weighting and a little bit jiggly too. The brake pedal is soft underfoot as well. And the drivetrain? Well, the 6-speed automatic is smooth in its operation and smart with its shifts, but the engine is a bit noisy, and while it gets the job done, it was the slowest car here for acceleration. You can tell Kia has tuned the suspension and steering of the Cerato for Australian road conditions because it offers a comfortable and compliant ride on less than perfect surfaces. It has a slightly firmer suspension tune that tends towards sporty in the way it handles, and that's great on a windy road, but it can make for some sharp interactions with speed humps and pockmarks on the road at lower speeds. At pace, the engine and transmission are a good team, working well together despite some thrashiness to the engine under hard acceleration, but it's around town where the drivetrain disappoints, feeling lethargic and confused at times. On top of that, the steering is too heavy at parking pace as well, meaning it feels like it needs a bit too much work to manoeuvre into a spot. The Toyota Corolla was, once again, our winner when it came to driving enjoyment. It has a really perky engine and a clever transmission with a launch gear. Now that's a conventional first gear before the car switches over to CVT mode. And I know there's a lot of people out there who hate CVTs, but you should try the Corolla's one because it's really, really good. It's also got the most powerful engine and was the best for acceleration. It's a real zippy little car and really fun to drive. The steering is excellent too. It's the best of this trio because it combines accuracy and precision with a really light action, which makes it nice and easy to park around town, but it still has a good amount of feel to the driver's hands at higher speeds as well. This was the car that put the biggest smile on our testers' faces because it just has the best balance and is the most fun to drive. You will notice a little bit of road noise over coarse chip sections of road, but the ride comfort offsets it because it's really, really well sorted. The suspension soaks up bumps and lumps really well at low speeds and at higher speeds as well. And over speed humps and through roundabouts, over road joins, over potholes, it's just a really well sorted chassis. All things considered, and for all of our judges, the Toyota Corolla was the best to drive and the most enjoyable too. Over our testing, we kept a tally of the fuel consumption for each of these hatchbacks. Now here, you'll see the official combined fuel figure for each of these models. Now that's what the company says each should use. And here you'll see our real world fuel use, which we took at the Bowser, and that's what you can expect in actual day-to-day driving. We'll give you a sec to let it all settle in. Each of these three cars has 5 doors and 5 seats, but you can get a sedan model if you so choose of each of these models. Well, the Corolla arrives late in 2019, but the other two have sedan models already available. But hatchbacks arguably have the practicality edge. They're generally shorter, so they're easier to park around town. They've also got a bigger boot opening for loading things in and out. There's quite a bit of variance in terms of boot capacity, and we understand why boot size could be the difference between one of these cars being right for you or being ruled out. To give you an idea of how they compare in the real world, we loaded up the CarsGuide luggage in each of these models, as well as our trusty pram. You can see from the vision that some of them weren't as good as others at this task. Still no fit. So we've got pretty clear standings when it comes to boot space, but what about the rest of the interiors? Let's take a closer look. The interior of the Kia Cerato is a really well-designed place. It's very ergonomically thought out, so everything falls to hand exactly where you'd expect. And the controls and the buttons and knobs all feel of a decent quality as well. Some people might not like this tablet-style dash-top screen, but it's really easy to use. And the storage is well sorted as well. There's good cup holders here, there's a decent storage nook in front of the gear shifter and a shelf as well for your phone. And generally, it looks and feels nice. It's even the only one of this trio with a leather-wrapped steering wheel. But things get a little bit worse when you start to feel the sides and the doors, which are hard plastic and they don't actually look that nice or feel that nice. But generally, it's impressive. Let's check out the back seat. Now in each of these cars, you'll see me sitting behind my own driving position. I'm about 6 feet tall, which is, a little bit above average for an adult male. And I've got plenty of space back here. I've got a lot of knee room, more than the others, as you'll see soon. And I've got good toe room and good headroom as well. It's also probably the widest, so you can fit 3 adults across if you need to. But generally you won't have to do that if you're buying this sort of car. It's the only one that misses out on matte pockets on the backs of the seats, and they're also that harsh, scratchy plastic, which is good if you've got kids because they might kick the back of your seat and it means you're not going to damage the fabric. Generally back here, it's a pretty nice place to be and definitely feels spacious for the size of the car. As soon as you sit in the Mazda 3 base model car, you have to remind yourself that it is a base model. It looks beautiful in here, although it is let down by one crucial element. It's got a plastic steering wheel, which both looks, well, it looks okay, but the feel of it is just average. It doesn't live up to the rest of the cabin because it is a really nice space, and this big screen that sits on top of the dash also looks really good. But it's not the most usable because it's not a touch screen. And that makes little sense when you've got Apple CarPlay as standard because phone mirroring is supposed to mirror a phone. You're supposed to be able to use touch to control it, but instead you've got to use the rotary dial. And let me tell you, that gets annoying pretty quick. So I'd actually prefer to use Bluetooth instead, because the native system in the media system is better than you might think. Now, in terms of cabin ergonomics and space utilization, there's a nice big center console in here, and it's got a nice sliding lid, which is very soft to the touch. There's cup holders here, and there's a nice storage caddy in front as well. It's a really well thought out space, although it is quite dark in here. I wonder if that's the same story in the back. Now, if I look a little bit less comfortable in the back of the Mazda 3, well, the videographer's doing his job, because it's not very comfortable back here behind my own seating position. My knees are rubbing up against the seat. But the biggest problem for me is that it feels really claustrophobic, because the roof line and the window line, well, there's not much window there at all. If you've got young kids, they might not be able to see out, which could mean car sickness. Or if you've got adults, well, they might just freak out because there's not that much space back here. But the seat is very comfortable. It's nice and squishy, but it does miss out on a center armrest with cup holders, but the other two cars get that. So yeah, not perfect back here. Up front in the Toyota Corolla base model, it doesn't feel as premium as the Mazda, and it doesn't feel as practical as the Cerato, but it does feel sportier than the other two. And a lot of that comes down to just the shapes that they've used for the design, and also the seats, which they've got so much bolster and support. They're really, really comfortable, but they do eat into the space in the back. We'll get to that in a sec. But let's talk about what's happening up here, because there are cup holders, there's a slightly smaller storage area under the dash. Weirdly, the USB port is just there, and there's only one USB port where the other two cars have two USB ports. So that's a little bit annoying. And let's talk media, because up here you've got the floating 8-inch screen, which again, some people might like or might hate. And it doesn't have Apple CarPlay or Android Auto just yet, but later in 2019, Toyota will roll it out, and it'll be standard on every new Corolla, and you'll be able to upgrade your existing Corolla if you've already got one. Generally, it's a pretty nice space, but just like the Mazda, it's missing a leather steering wheel, but for some reason, the Toyota version feels just a little bit nicer in the hand. So, backseat space in the Corolla. This is set in my position, just remember that again. So I've got a little bit more knee room than I did in the Mazda, but not as much as I did in the Cerato. But the big problem back here for me, I'm 6 foot, is headroom. Like, I'm sort of bumping my head on the grab handle, especially when you're going over bumps. That can be, well, dangerous and frustrating, but if you're a shorter person, you'll be comfortable back here. And also, these seats are sculpted a little bit better than the other cars. So if you're sitting 4 up, you're actually pretty well holstered in your spot. But generally, it could be better back here. It and the Mazda 3 both could improve in terms of practicality if that's what matters to you. If you want the best for backseat space and comfort and ease of use, then the Cerato is probably your pick. Remember I mentioned earlier that the Cerato S that we've got has an optional safety pack fitted? Yeah, it'll cost you $1,500, and the difference is that you get a 5-star NCAP safety rating compared to a 4-star rating if you don't option the pack. And the reason for that is you get a more advanced auto emergency braking system plus a few other tech items. And to us, that's money well spent. Now that may matter to you or it may not, but here's a breakdown of the standard spec in each of these models as tested. Now remember, we're talking about the Cerato S with the safety pack when it comes to these specs. As tested, all 3 cars have AEB with pedestrian and cyclist detection, lane departure warning and lane keep assist. The Kia and Mazda 3 both have blind spot monitoring and rear cross traffic alert, but you can't get those on this grade of Corolla, even optionally. The Mazda also gets rear AEB, which is excellent, and all have adaptive cruise control, but the Mazda's the only one with a head-up display. All 3 have a reversing camera, but you have to get parking sensors fitted at the dealer for the Toyota. The others have rear sensors, and the Kia has front ones as well. The Kia's airbag count is lower than the other two as it misses out on driver's knee protection. And as you may have been able to tell, when it comes to NCAP scores, you need to get the Kia Cerato S with the optional safety pack to get 5 stars. The other two have 5 stars as standard. We literally spent hours trying to separate these three very impressive small hatchbacks to come up with a winner. But the fact is that each of them offers something to a different buyer. If you really value practicality, then the Kia Cerato S could be perfect for you. If safety is your thing, then the Mazda3 G20 Pure could be the perfect car for you. And if you really like the way a car drives, and if that's important to you, then the Toyota Corolla Ascent Sport might be your pick. But against our review criteria, which you can read on the site in the full detailed review of these three cars, here's what we found. The Kia Cerato S, only when fitted with the safety pack, is a value-packed hatchback that's big on space and spec. But it was let down by its urban driving manners, and also it was the worst for fuel use. The Mazda3 G20 Pure is the safety tech benchmark. In isolation, it's a really impressive small hatchback, but against these cars, it fell short for comfort, and it's also pretty pricey. The Toyota Corolla Ascent Sport is also pretty expensive for a car of this type, but you're rewarded with a lovely car to drive no matter the road. Sure, it may be a little bit short in terms of rear seat space and boot space, but in this SUV mad world, that doesn't matter quite as much as it once did. So it's our winner, but only just in this comparison test. You might disagree with that, but don't go smashing us yet. Go to the CarsGuide site and read the full review. And if you're watching on YouTube, don't forget to hit subscribe, hit like, and also tick that bell icon so you can stay up to date with all our latest content.